When you think of a hospital, you probably imagine a place that's always bright, busy, and full of life. But what happens after the visiting hours are over, when the corridors empty out and the lights dim down? Tonight, I'm going to share 3 true hospital horror stories from Vietnam that might just make you think twice before your next visit. Grab a blanket, turn off the lights if you dare, and let's begin with our first story, the night shift at Cho Ray Hospital. Our story comes from a man who used to work as a security guard at the famous Cho Ray Hospital in Ho Chi Minh City. It says most people don't understand what a hospital truly becomes after 1 a.m. It transforms into something else entirely. A place where the silence is heavier than any sound you've ever heard. He remembers one particular shift about 3 years ago. The hospital was eerily quiet that night, and even the usually harsh fluorescent lights seemed to flicker with a strange, weak glow. He was doing his rounds in the old wing section C, an area that was mostly abandoned, used only for storage and the rare overflow of patients. It was a part of the hospital that already felt forgotten by time. Around 1:40 in the morning, he was walking down a long, empty hallway when he passed room 37. The door was just slightly ajar, a dark sliver in the otherwise uniform wall of closed doors. The lights inside were off, but that wasn't what caught his attention. It was the sound. A woman's voice, whispering. It wasn't a conversation, and it wasn't someone crying. It was a soft, repetitive whisper, like a mantra or a desperate prayer. It felt like a secret being told to the darkness itself. His radio crackled for a split second, a burst of static that made him jump. But then there was silence again. Gathering his courage, he pushed the heavy wooden door open a little wider. "Hello? Is someone in here?" he called out, his voice sounding loud in the suffocating quiet. The whispering stopped instantly. The sudden absence of the sound was almost more terrifying than the sound itself. He switched on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the thick darkness of the room. The light swept across the empty floor, the old furniture, and then landed on the bed near the window, and that's when he saw her. A woman was sitting on the edge of the mattress, her back partially to him. She had long black hair that fell over her face like a veil, and she was wearing a standard-issue patient gown. She was perfectly still. She didn't even flinch as he took a cautious step into the room. "Miss, are you all right? Think you might be in the wrong room," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. He took another step closer, his hand reaching for his radio. She didn't respond with words. Instead, she slowly, so slowly, raised her head. The beam of his flashlight hit her face, what should have been her face, but there was nothing there. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a horrifying, blurry smear of shadow, as if someone had taken an eraser and wiped her features clean from existence. A wave of pure terror washed over him. Stumbled backward, his hands fumbling, and his flashlight clattered to the floor, plunging the room into near-total darkness for a moment. He scrambled to pick it up, his heart hammering against his ribs. When the light finally flickered back on and he aimed it at the bed, she was gone. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made, as if no one had been there at all. He didn't even bother to close the door. He turned and ran, not stopping until he reached the main nurse's station. He breathlessly explained what he had just seen to the head nurse on duty. She listened with a frown, her expression turning from confusion to concern. When he finished, she looked at him with a chilling seriousness and said something that froze his blood solid.
At.
"Impossible," she said. "Room 37 is empty.
At.
It hasn't had a patient for a week. The last person who stayed there, she passed away. Last night." He quit that job 2 weeks later. He couldn't shake the image of that faceless woman from his mind. But the story doesn't end there. He says that every year since, around the same time of year, he'll occasionally hear it again, faint ghostly whispering, whenever he passes a room with a door that's been left just slightly open. Story 2. 2 years ago, I was admitted to Bach my hospital in Hanoi for a minor surgery. It was a pretty standard hospital. Nothing out of the ordinary at first. On my first night, my roommate, an older man who had been there for a while, leaned over and told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Hey, a word of advice. If you see elevator number 4 open by itself after midnight, whatever you do, don't get in. Doesn't carry the living." I just laughed it off, thinking it was one of those old hospital superstitions people tell to spook the new patients. I wish I had taken him seriously. For the first 2 nights, nothing happened. But on my third night, I woke up around 12:30 a.m., my throat completely dry. I decided to head down the hall to the vending machine near the elevators to grab a bottle of water. The hospital was eerily quiet. I mean, dead silent. There were no nurses on their rounds, no footsteps echoing in the distance, just the low, constant hum of the fluorescent lights above. It felt like I was the only person awake in the entire building. As I was walking past the bank of elevators, the doors to elevator number 4 suddenly slid open with a soft chime. I stopped in my tracks. The elevator was completely empty. No one was inside and no one had called it. I hadn't even gotten close enough to press the button. But what really made my skin crawl was that the button for the top floor was lit up, glowing in the darkness. As I stood there, confused, a sound started to drift out from the empty car. It was breathing, slow, raspy, and incredibly labored, like someone was struggling for every single breath. A chill shot down my spine. "Hello? Is someone in there? Do you need help?" I called out, my voice trembling a little. The sound of my own voice seemed to amplify the silence around me. That's when a hand shot out from the far corner of the elevator. It was thin and bone-white with long, spindly fingers. It grabbed the edge of the doorway, and I watched in horror as it started to pull something or someone out of the shadows. A woman slowly stepped into the dim light of the hallway. Her face was a mess swollen, covered in dark bruises, and her head was tilted to one side, her neck twisted at an angle that just wasn't humanly possible. It looked completely broken. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I was just frozen, staring at this horrifying figure. She looked right at me, her eyes empty and dark, and she whispered, "Come with me." Her voice was wet and gurgling, like her throat was filling up with liquid. The lights inside the elevator began to flicker wildly, buzzing and flashing, casting her face in and out of shadow. The elevator doors started to slide shut, but my eyes were locked on her. I was still standing there, paralyzed with fear, as the doors closed, hiding her from my view. The moment they clicked shut, my legs finally started working again. I turned and ran, sprinting back to my room without looking back. I slammed the door and locked it, my whole body shaking. The next morning, I was a wreck. I managed to find a nurse, and trying to sound sane, I told her what I had seen. Her face went pale. She looked around nervously before leaning in and whispering, "That's impossible." "Elevator number 4. It's been out of order for a week. It's been shut down ever since a patient, a woman, hanged herself inside." I didn't need to hear another word. I checked myself out and transferred to a different hospital that same day. I try not to think about it, but the memory never really leaves you. Even now, whenever I'm alone in a building at night and I hear the chime of an elevator, I can't help but feel a chill run down my spine. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I can still hear that slow, raspy breathing coming from behind the closed doors. Story 3. As a young medical intern at a major hospital in Da Nang, my days were long, but my nights were even longer. My duties often involved handling paperwork, and occasionally that meant trips down to the morgue during the night shift. Now, you'd think the worst part about morgue duty would be, well, the obvious. The bodies. But it wasn't. The veteran staff, the nurses, the orderlies. Everyone hated morgue duty for a completely different reason. It was the lights. Every single night without fail they would flicker, and always at the exact same time, 2:13 a.m. No one knew why. The maintenance crew had checked the wiring a dozen times. They replaced the bulbs, the starters, everything. But the problem persisted. It became a hospital legend, a spooky little quirk we all learned to live with. One particularly grueling night, I was drowning in a sea of patient files. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, then 1 a.m., then 2 a.m. I was determined to finish before heading home. Around 2:10 a.m., a low, persistent buzzing started to echo down the empty hallway from the direction of the morgue. It was louder than usual, almost aggressive. I glanced at the clock on my computer screen. 2:12. My heart started to pound. I'd heard the stories, of course, but I'd always managed to be somewhere else, busy with a patient or safely at the nurse's station, when 2:13 a.m. rolled around. Tonight I was alone, and the morgue was just down the hall. I told myself it was just faulty electricity and tried to focus on my work, bracing for the inevitable flicker. Then the clock struck 2:13 a.m. The entire morgue corridor erupted into chaos. The lights didn't just flicker. They strobed violently, flashing on and off like a rave party in hell. The air grew instantly, shockingly cold. So cold that when I exhaled, I could see a plume of my own breath fogging up in front of me. An icy dread washed over me, a primal fear that had nothing to do with old wiring, and that's when it happened. Beneath the sterile white sheets covering the gurneys, the bodies, they started moving. It wasn't dramatic, not like in the movies where they sit bolt upright. It was subtler, and somehow so much more terrifying. A slight shift of a shoulder here, a twitch of a finger there, a gentle, undulating movement under the sheets, as if they were all collectively stirring in their sleep. My blood ran cold. My eyes darted around the room, landing on the wall of refrigerated drawers. One of them, labeled M12, began to rattle. At first, it was a gentle vibration, but it quickly escalated, shaking violently in its metal frame. A loud, rhythmic banging echoed from within, as if someone or something was desperately kicking the door, trying to get out. That was it. My training, my logic, my composure, it all evaporated. I scrambled from my desk and bolted for the exit. But the hallway, usually just a short stretch of polished tile, seemed to have transformed. It felt impossibly long, the door at the far end stretching away from me with every step I took, like a nightmare you can't run from. Behind me, the horrifying sound of scraping metal cut through the air, the screech of a drawer sliding open, then another. I didn't dare look back. My ears were filled with the sounds of soft, wet footsteps slapping against the tile floor. Plap, plap. They were getting closer. I finally slammed into the exit door, fumbling for my ID card. I swiped it against the reader. Nothing. The light stayed red. Locked. Panic seized me. I swiped it again and again, my hand shaking uncontrollably. Red. Red. Then, a cold breath tickled the back of my neck, and a low, raspy voice whispered directly into my left ear, a voice that sounded dry and unused. It said just 3 words, "Stay with us." At that exact moment, the card reader beeped, and the light flashed green. The door clicked open. I burst through it, not stopping, not looking back, running until I collapsed at the main nurse's station, gasping for air. When I finally managed to tell the senior doctor what had happened, he didn't look surprised. He didn't call me crazy. He just sighed, a weary, tired sound, and rubbed his eyes. "Drawer M12, he said quietly. "That was a young man from a bad traffic accident a few years ago. We couldn't get to him in time to disconnect the ventilator after he was declared brain dead. It's just ... residual energy. Happens every night." He said it so calmly, as if discussing the weather. I quit my internship the next day. I never worked alone in a hospital again. And to this day, I avoid them at all costs. Some things you just can't unsee. Thanks for watching. If these stories sent a chill down your spine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more true horror stories from around the world. Stay safe out there.